My morbid fascination for cults began long ago, when I was a young man hearing about a terrible incident in which a great many people died. Now, I naturally felt immense sympathy for the corrupted minds and souls lost that day, but something in me yearned to understand the psychological aspect of it all better. The years went by and my interest only grew with the satanic panic of the 80s and 90s. Eventually, though, I found my calling. I decided I wanted to quietly investigate cult psychology by embedding myself within them. Or, as any normal person would say, I joined a bunch of cults. It started small, religious kind of stuff, groups similar to Scientology. These were a good starting point because their collective basis was somewhat still grounded in reality. Not that I was ever the spiritual type, but I could see the appeal, even if to someone like myself, the ideas posited remained completely ridiculous. Through the years, hopping from religious cult to religious cult, I learned a great deal about why people gave everything they had up to join these groups. Now, you might have already guessed the answer, but seeing it and being able to walk into a room of devotees and feel its thick, choking presence in the air made it so much more real. Fear. Naturally, I was forced to partake in their activities, to eat their food, to drink their drink. I had to become them, or else I'd be discovered. With the comparatively gentle nature of the earlier cults I joined, this wasn't much of an issue, but the constant sense of obsessive duty began to take its toll on me as the intensity rose. From reality-grounded religious cults, I moved on to animal sacrifice cults, and then on to UFO cults before ending up here. One beyond simple description. After a run-of-the-mill pre-joining research period, I found myself stumbling through thick brush and leaves to attend my initiation deep within the woods at the edge of town. Usually I had to travel pretty extensively to join a new cult, but this one was based close enough that it'd be far more convenient than the other options I had lined up. The thought of having my own bed to go back to every once in a while, rather than living in their commune indefinitely, sounded nice too. Eventually, I came across a group of young-looking men and women standing in a large circle with interconnected hands. A stone was seemingly suspended in the air just above a raging campfire, and a man stood next to it with his back to me. Without turning, he spoke. "I see our latest brother has arrived. Welcome to our blessed commune." Thank you. My name is No Names," he retorted midway through my sentence. "Well, okay, I'm glad to be here. What would you like me to do?" I was familiar with initiations, and the audience surrounding me suggested it'd be more of the same. Taking an oath, reading some words from a scroll, repeating a phrase from a long-forgotten language, that kind of thing. The man still stood with his back to me and commanded me to walk closer to him, closer to the stone above the campfire. As I walked, the carving on the stone became clearer to me. It was a face, and not one that was human either. "Take this dagger and draw blood." Oh, I'd never been asked to give blood to whatever idea I'd be pretending to worship before. I felt like I was in a bad horror movie, and I loved it. The sharp tip of the blade he handed me behind his back pierced the skin across my palm, and I grimaced before he finally turned to me. He was as young as the others in the circle around me, and yet the look in his eyes was one of a weathered man, someone who'd seen a lot, done a lot. "Provide the stone with your offering," he spoke whilst his eyes obsessively followed mine. Crimson blood dripped down into the crevice of the carving before me and eventually into the fire. My train of thought was interrupted by the cult members around me breaking into a collective hymn. I tried to make out what they were saying, but it was all unintelligible. Part of me thought it must have been the language of whatever entity they were worshipping, but it didn't sound like any language at all. Then they began to walk away, backwards, creating more distance between me and them, yet never breaking eye contact. The chanting grew louder and louder, and the structure of the circle remained as it had been. The leader traveling in the middle, along with the suddenly mobile fire and stone. Part of me wanted to follow, but another, more instinctual part screamed at me to accept their departure. I shouted out, though, in an effort to understand what they were doing, where they were going. It yielded no results, and before long I was standing alone in the tall trees and whistling wind, completely alone. Thankfully, I managed to make my way home from those woods. I've come to find out that I brought something horrible along with me. I spent the next few days trying to find out anything beyond what my initial research into the hometown cult, as I've come to refer to it, revealed. With no contact from the people in the woods, I was left to my own devices and scoured the internet for anything that might have helped. Eventually, I came across something. Not much, but something. A newspaper archive from 127 years ago, detailing the mass disappearance of every 35-year-old in the town. Supposedly, there had been 37 of them all those years ago, and the townsfolk woke up on the morning of June 27th to find they were all missing. Children walked into the bedrooms of their parents to find sheets strewn on the floor, and weary husbands awoke to their sleeping wives no longer by their sides. Rumor had it at the time that their personal effects were found in a circle deep within the woods at the edge of town, just like the circle I'd seen. I tried to glean some context into the investigation and what happened next from later editions of the paper, but had no luck. It was as if there was a single mention of the incident, and then it too disappeared. Within a few days, and without much progress beyond the newspaper I'd found, my mind drifted away from the topic, and I found myself looking forward to a little break from my cult investigating facilities. My ignorant bliss didn't last long enough, though, unfortunately. Before long, a sense of duty began to envelop me, call out to me. I began to hear the hymn of the circle and the blood-soaked face of the stone entity in the dreams. Its face became engraved onto my mind, and it would just be there, present, always. I'd never been a person with a troubled mind, even given my escapades into mass psychological delusions. But the hymn grew louder, clearer. It wasn't incomprehensible any longer, and the things it was telling me were terrifying. The fear enveloped my every waking moment and my every dreaming moment. Perhaps I should have known my little hobby would someday move beyond delusions of salvation, move into real-life pain, torment. It wanted me to hurt myself, to give my life away as I'd pledged. As I'd pledged? What the fuck? I thought before finally realizing my little blood offering was far beyond the realm of simple initiation. I stumbled across my first human sacrifice cult. The hymns drown out the outside world now. They command me, and I obey. Part of me remains afraid, but fear can be drowned out too. Yesterday, the hymns chanted something nice to me for the first time. Happy birthday to you. 35 was always going to be a big year for me.